is such an amazing jumble of bad management, violation of good evasion practices, lucky breaks, and cool action in the pinches that it is hard to know where to seize hold of it. That was the evaluation of the Allied military intelligence officer who reviewed Lieutenant Krengle's Escape and Evasion report. To read Krengle's report, you would think it was a script out of a Hollywood comedy movie, where the hero, despite his innocence and mistakes made, still makes it home alive. Was it divine intervention at the right time, or was it just pure luck that Lieutenant Krengle evaded the Nazis and made it back to the UK safely? Who knows? However, his report is a riveting read, as they say. So, get comfortable and enjoy the story of First Lieutenant Robert V. Krengle's adventures in occupied France during World War II. Okay, it was December 30th, 1943, Army Air Force Base 114, Hethel, England. First Lieutenant Robert Krengle was awakened from his sleep at around 4 a.m. by an orderly. He and his crew were notified that they were to fly today. The mission was to Ludwigshafen, Germany, to bomb the chemical plant. Now, Krengle, a bombardier, was part of the 389th Bomb Group in the 564th Squadron. The planes they flew were the B-24D models. That's the one without the nose turret. Now, 20 miles southeast of Soisson, one engine was smoking and a second engine had a runaway propeller. These engines were on the same side. The crew had no choice but to bail out of the aircraft. First Lieutenant Krengle, since he was a bombardier, went out through the nose wheel compartment at approximately 4,000 feet. He only waited long enough to clear the plane when he pulled his ripcord. Now, Krengle reported he saw all the chutes open from his airplane. As he descended to the ground, he could see several Frenchmen standing in the field gesticulating. When Krengle landed among the Frenchmen, they said the Germans were coming and then the French guys ran away. Now, Krengle stated in his report, I hid my chute as well as I could, then I hurried off into the woods. Krengle had a major problem. There was no underbrush to burrow into, just large, tall trees with thick trunks. Desperate to conceal himself, Krengle crawled as close as possible to the base of a tree. He stated, I had scarcely taken up this position when a German patrol came into the field. One German on a bicycle rode into the grove and came within inches of me, but neither he nor the one who came an hour later saw me. Now, for the next 3 hours, Krengle stated, I remained motionless around the base of the tree. Then suddenly he heard several shots fired in the field and concluded that the Germans must have found his parachute. He said, I decided that it was time for me to get away from the vicinity. Now, Krengle slowly extricated himself from the vicinity, at first walking slowly and then running through the groves. Suddenly, he found himself in another open field. Running across the field, he stopped short at the brink of a high bluff. Now, at this point, it gets kind of comical. Krengle stated, as I glanced over the edge, I saw a German soldier standing below me. Afraid that any movement might attract his attention, I froze in my tracks, and then, after a few moments, I began cautiously to back away. Fortunately, he did not look up, and as soon as I was out of his line of vision, I broke into a run and just kept going until dusk. Now, at this point, Lieutenant Krengle sees a farmyard wall. So, what do you think he does? Scout the place to see if there are any Germans? I mean, that's what most people would do in that situation. The airmen were briefed on what to do in a situation like that, as a matter of fact. Lieutenant Krengle boldly enters the courtyard with the intention of hiding there until night. Yep, just strolled by the house. He wanted to find a barn to sleep in. No problem. Yeah, the gods were smiling down on Krengle. He stated, a girl who was milking a cow in the courtyard saw me. However, When I explained who I was, she took me to a working men's dugout under the highway and told me to spend the night, and at daybreak to go to a certain farm down the road. You know, you just can't make this stuff up. So far, Lieutenant Krengle has parachuted out of a disabled bomber, landed in a field where a bunch of Frenchmen happen to be standing. They, in turn, tell him to go into the woods to hide. He gets into the woods and finds there's no underbrush to hide in, so he wraps himself around the base of a large tree trunk and is not discovered. He then finds himself at the edge of a bluff, and at the bottom of that bluff is a German soldier who is looking the wrong way. But wait, it gets better from here. Well, the next morning, Krengle followed the milkmaid's directions to the farmhouse down the road. He stated, "I was welcome to the farmhouse he told me to go to." Okay, this is the luckiest guy in the world at that time. Krengle had made it to a place that was safe, and he could get help. He was sitting pretty, basically. He stated, "I was hidden in the cellar during the day and kept in the house at night. During the day, Germans came to the house inquiring about Allied aviators, but they left when the family assured them that none had been seen." I mean, talk about being watched over by some unseen force. Krengle was safe and in the pipeline to the UK. All he had to do was listen to his handlers and follow directions. The only possible thing that could go wrong was if someone betrayed him or, yeah, here's the or. Well, it seems after 2 days and 2 nights, Krengle became impatient. He told his helpers that he wanted to be on his way. Now, the helpers did not want him to leave, but Krengle was insistent. So, they gave him civilian clothes, took him to the next town, and put him on a train with a ticket to Paris. Now, correct me if I'm wrong here, but isn't that Escape and Evasion Rule 101? Once in safe hands, do not leave until you make it home? Okay, Krengle makes it to Paris, and wouldn't you know, German sentries were checking identity papers at the gate. Yeah, go figure, right? Well, now this should be the point where Lieutenant Krengle, United States Army Air Force, becomes Lieutenant Krengle, POW. I said should be the point, but it's not. At the very moment, 2 peasant women with enormous packages passed him. Now, thinking on his feet, Krengle did what a gentleman would do in that situation. Quote, "Without saying anything, I took the 2 bundles from them and, hidden by these bundles, followed the 2 women out through the gate." Now, that was pretty smart on his part. It seemed the officer who scrutinized the women's papers scarcely looked at Krengle. Okay, I know, now you're saying this can't have happened. This is too far-fetched. Well, Krengle put this in his official E&E report, so I would say yes, it did happen. But I will give kudos to him. He writes one heck of a story. He continued, "Once on the street, I returned the bundles to the women and only then recognized the hopelessness and danger of my position." Yeah, what gave away the danger, you ask? Well, Krengle wrote, "There were Germans everywhere, and I did not have even an identity card." Alright, so he's in the middle of Paris, no identity cards, Germans all over the joint. Oh yeah, and one more thing. His shoes he was given back at the farm were too small, so every step he took was pure torture. Okay, if he sat down or just stood there, he was cooked. The SS would swoop down on him so fast he wouldn't know what hit him. Krengle had to keep moving. There was just one small problem. He had no idea where he should go. He had never been to Paris, and now is not the time to go up to a cop and say, "Excuse me, I'm trying to get back to England. Could you help me, please?" But at that moment, the air raid siren sounded. Now this was not good. The police started herding people into the shelters. This was the last place on earth for Krengle to go to. He remembered being told during his E&E training the last place a down flyer wanted to go was into an air raid shelter. That's where the Germans frequently examined the papers of people who congregated in the shelter. Krengle had to do something, and he had to do it fast. The police, or worse, the Gestapo, might corral him in that shelter. With no option left, Krengle stepped through the doorway of the closest apartment house. He stated, "As I did so, I came face to face with a workman who had run down the stairs when he heard the siren. Since he stopped and looked at me inquisitively, I told him who I was and that I had to find a refuge at once." Once more, Krengle had dodged a bullet. The workman was not a collaborator, so he hid Krengle in the vacant apartment and stayed with him and helped him work out a plan to get out of Paris. Krengle had more lives than a cat, it seems. So Krengle and the workman decided his best chance was to take a train to Bourges and walk across the line of demarcation into Vichy, France. Now, to ride the train across the line was too dangerous. The German military controls were very strict and all over that line of demarcation. So the workman took Krengle to his home for the night. Now, on the way, they stopped at the train station to purchase the ticket. Now, while waiting outside, a bus pulled up. When Krengle looked into the bus, what he saw was a German guard and 16 American airmen, one of whom was a crew member of Krengle's. The crew member looked Krengle squarely in the eye but said nothing. Now, Krengle for his part tried to act like the rest of the civilians, gawking at the bus with curiosity. Now, summoning all the restraint he had, he managed to walk away from the bus in a casual manner. Now, getting into the city of Bourges on the train was the easy part. However, once in, there was no way out. Krengle stated, "The next day I reached Bourges without incident, but the city which gave me no trouble entering appeared to have no exit. German soldiers swarmed everywhere, and on every road that led out of the city." Now, the German soldiers were carefully examining every civilian's papers at every checkpoint. Krengle was stuck in Bourges. Okay, so now Krengle's walking the streets of Bourges, desperately avoiding German checkpoints. He stated, "Finally, as I was dragging myself about the city, I collided with a man, and before I could check my instinctive reaction, I blurted out, 'Excuse me,' in English." Now, you would think that the game was up at this point. Well, you'd be wrong. Once again, someone was watching over Lieutenant Krengle. Quote, "The man smiled, told me with his little English to meet him on that spot 2 hours hence, and then went on." Now, the man was either playing a game with Krengle or something happened, because the man never showed. Krengle waited 10 minutes, then 20. Finally, after 30 minutes, Krengle gave up hope and got out of the area fast. His disappointment, on top of his hunger and exhaustion and the pain in his feet from wearing shoes that were too small, made him take dangerous chances. Now, when a person is in a situation like that, the combination of hunger, exhaustion, physical pain will cloud a person's judgment. Krengle was no exception. He was desperate for any kind of help. He stated, "I stopped the first person I saw alone, a boy on a bicycle. I declared myself to him and begged him for help. He took me at once to a house where a woman gave me dinner and then hid me in her garage. Not the safest place to hide, but then again, unless the Nazis were suspicious of this woman's activities, her garage was better than nothing." Krengle could at least get some desperately needed sleep, right? Wrong. Early in the evening, the boys came rushing into the garage, and he had a friend with him. The boy excitedly told him he had to get moving now. There was a train leaving for Toulouse in 15 minutes, and he had to be on it. The young boys gave Krengle apples and cigarettes for the journey and took him to the train station, and they even bought him his ticket. Now, that would seem strange, kids buying train tickets, but it was 1944 France and there was a war on, so who knows? Now, Krengle was given last-minute instructions to change trains at Soisson, France, and with those parting words from the young boys, the intrepid young flyer was off to Soisson and alone again. Now, the train ride from Bourges to Toulouse was uneventful. It was when he got off the train that things began to heat up. Quote, "In Toulouse the next morning, I saw the Gestapo was checking papers at the gate." Now, the Gestapo were the German secret police. They did not fool around. If they captured you, then you were in for a very difficult time of torture. They would pull out fingernails, hit you with hard rubber hoses, constantly bashing of the testicles, and other nasty stuff. They would put you in a cell, strip you naked, then turn the heat up to 100+ degrees or so, and then turn the heat down to just above freezing. These guys learned their trade at Helga's House of Horrors, basically. Now, the Gestapo would torture Krengle for a bit until they learned he was a downed American flyer. Then they would torture him some more just for the fun of it. These people were sadistic scum. Well, luckily for Krengle, he did the only thing he could do. He walked down the line into the marshalling yards and had almost made it out of sight when a voice called out for him to halt. The fight or flight emotion kicked into high gear. One glance over my shoulder revealed a German soldier armed with a rifle. I doubled around the freight train, ran back to the train which I had just left, and boarded it again. I then locked myself in the lavatory. Now, Krengle came out of the bathroom only after the train left the station. He was able to purchase a ticket to Carcassonne without any problem. Now, arriving in Carcassonne, Krengle left the station and began walking southward. By evening, he approached a farmhouse. By evening, he approached a farmhouse intending to ask for help. The woman who answered the door took one look at him and slammed the door in his face. Krengle had no choice. He had to double back in his path, and he came into a small railroad station. He decided, why should he walk when he could ride? Okay, not too bright, but that's still fine. Now, in normal times, I would agree with that reasoning, but these were not normal times. Krengle was a shot-down American flyer making his way across occupied France with armed German military and Gestapo looking for him. Yeah, going in cold to a train station was not the brightest choice he could have made. However, once again, his guardian angel was looking out for him. Quote, I entered the train station and asked for a ticket. The agent looked up at me and asked me whether I was French. When I said no, he laughed and said, I thought not. Then he told me to wait, and then he disappeared. Now, what would any reasonable person do in Krengle's situation? I know what I would have done. I'd have run as fast as I could out of the train station and hid. What did Krengle do? He waited for the agent to come back. A few minutes later, the agent returned, and instead of the Gestapo or military police, the ticket agent had a friend with him. The friend took him home for the night, and then the next morning brought him back to the station and placed him aboard a train. Okay, now this train was crowded. Krengle sat next to a man, and he was afraid to talk or do anything that would give away his true identity, so he just sat there. Now, he had no idea who was on that train or who could be trusted and who could not be trusted. In the report, he stated, after a while, I wrote on a piece of paper that I was an American. Now, luckily for Krengle, the Frenchman sitting next to him was connected with the French underground. The man wrote, he would put me into the hands of a friend. After a while, the man left his seat. Another man sat down next to me saying nothing, but giving me a significant glance. So he follows this man off the train at the station where my guide met several other men. Now the men put Krengle on a bus full of workmen. He was told to follow the last workman off the bus. The man he followed off the bus had second thoughts about helping Krengle. After leading him away from the bus stop, he said he was afraid he could not help me after all. Now, keeping his cool, Krengle asked, why? The man responded, Krengle might be a German agent. Astounded and angry, I responded, if I were a German agent, you'd already have compromised yourself. Well, the workman seemed to understand Krengle's cold logic. He agreed to help. He placed Krengle in a hiding place and told him to wait until 1600 when he would return. As promised, at 1600, the workman returned with another man. This man began to question Krengle, but when he was satisfied that Krengle was not a German agent, he took him back to Toulouse. Now, at this point, the story ends. The last line of the E&E report stated, he took me back to Toulouse from where my journey was arranged. Now, the intelligence officer who reviewed Krengle's report said it best. By any reasonable standard, Krengle should now be in Stalag Luft 3, cooling his heels. Interestingly, there's just something about Krengle's story that is amazing. It's his innocence, his ability to tell a story, his faith in other human beings. And it was that faith in other human beings that got him through this ordeal. It was an amazing journey for Krengle. I hope you liked this video. If you did, hit the like button, subscribe to my channel. Most importantly, leave a comment below. You see, the algorithm pushes my video out to a wider audience the more comments I get. Thank you for watching.